Hey, I'm excited to have both Jeff Rogers and Jimmy Trimble from Northside United Methodist Church join us today. So excited to hear from both. Jeff Rogers is the associate pastor at Northside United Methodist Church, and Jimmy is one of the lead mentors at Northside. So they are just finishing up their first season. So love to be able to hear from Jeff, kind of the impact he has seen from a church perspective, and then Jimmy just kind of what he has personally seen and heard as a mentor and what this process has meant to him. So, hey, thanks for joining us and look forward to digging in. Hey, thanks guys for taking a few minutes to join us on this today. We have different churches who are probably looking at this. We have churches who are kind of familiar with radical mentoring, and this is kind of their first go around of trying to launch. Then we have other churches who haven't heard of radical mentoring, and this is their first introduction to it. And so question I would love to, Jeff, and kind of get your thoughts on, as I know your introduction to radical mentoring was Reggie, and it began kind of diving into what this experience was. One of the questions that I know a lot of churches have to kind of weigh in is, how does it fit in what they do? Was that at all a struggle for you guys, or was it easy for you guys to kind of see how something like this would fit in what Northside does overall?
Yeah, that's a great question. Trey, appreciate you asking it. And radical mentoring, it has been a great thing for Northside Church. I've seen it as a pastor here, but also specifically with the men's ministry that I work with, kind of overseeing that. When you get men together, it's easier to get men to come to some of our bigger events that we do. You do a golf tournament and that gathers some interest. We do a breakfast. It's easy for guys to say, yeah, I'll show up and eat a piece of bacon with you. That's low hanging fruit. And then we have a really good small group ministry of men here where it'll be kind of a low commitment ministry engagement. So if a guy wants to show up any given Friday, then they can drop by. If they don't do anything to prepare, if they don't want to say anything, that's fine. We have the door open for them. They'll get to be part of prayers. They'll get to hear Christian conversation and have fellowship, but it's not asking too much of them if they don't want it.
Yeah.
What we were missing with our men specifically was an opportunity to dive deep with other men. And so it was neat to see how God worked these pieces of the puzzle together. Me hearing about radical mentoring, other people reading Reggie Campbell's mentoring devotional book that he has. And somehow in the midst of that, God brought all these puzzle pieces together to say, hey, you have some guys that are participating in small groups that will just show up and won't do anything more. This is an opportunity for those guys who are ready to go deep in their faith and in their relationship with God and others to participate in that type of experience. And they can grow from somebody that has been there before.
And from a pastor's perspective, what have you been able, what have you been able to see, or kind of what has been the experience that you've kind of heard of the impact that you feel like it's having on the men's ministry and just having on Northside in general?
Yeah, on the men's ministry, it's just energized it. It's given us something to strive for, a goal, kind of a vision, something we can hope to achieve, that more men can grow deeper. So that's a beautiful thing. It also grows leaders in your church. So you have a little bit of a bullpen, so to speak, if we're thinking about who do we want to lead mission projects, or who do we need on church boards, this type of thing. But I'll tell you where I see the real impact, and this comes from personal stories. I hope I don't steal this story from Jimmy, but it was a really neat moment. We had a church member, and I got word through our church systems, which are good systems, about a prayer concern, a family member that had grown sick. And it took me a couple of hours by the time that I got word and I was free to reach out and connect and pray with this church member. And by the time I was on the phone with this man, he told me, oh yeah, it was great, because the second I got this, Northside was there. I talked to my mentor and he prayed a powerful prayer. It gave me a lot of peace. So to see the church get smaller and bigger at the same time, smaller because there are more deep connections, but bigger because that kingdom impact is growing.
Jimmy, I would love to know from your perspective, what has kind of the experience just meant to you personally, mentoring, being in this mentoring process with a group of men like this?
Oh yeah, well, it was fantastic for me because it helped me to better understand God's purpose for me and a lot of the different things that He has guided me through in life. And we don't always get the smooth road, and often don't. And but in that process, we always pick up experiences and opportunities to grow as an individual and towards God, or closer to God. And so that was useful to me because these guys were all in their, mid to early 30s. And I think one might be in his late 30s. But for me, it was great because God really showed me how all of those difficult times or challenges that I had were really preparing me to be useful to Him.
That's great. Is there something about this experience versus other things you've done that's really kind of been unique for you?
Yeah, the program was fantastic. I love the structure of the program and the guidance that it provided. So we went outside of the structure a little bit. Hope I'm not jumping forward to any questions you're going to ask, but I'll go ahead and mention that we probably stuck with 80% of the program, but we went outside of it a little bit. So for example, I think it was maybe the second month where, I forget the book that was recommended, but we ended up going with Wild at Heart. And we went, and this was in, I think, February, and we went camping out at Stone Mountain. Wow. So we went into the wilderness. We hiked to the top of Stone Mountain. It was something like 33 degrees at night. It was very, it was a moment where we could be out there, be men, and kind of camp a little bit. And it fit in fantastically with the lesson. And I really felt like these guys needed to be stretched just a little bit in terms of in their boundaries. So I don't want to say they were soft. They just it just wasn't something they were used to doing. And so I tried to tie that in with get outside your comfort zone with Christian leadership, get outside your comfort zone.
Well, I love that because, one of the things that we see is, hey, what makes it stick in churches and with groups? And that's being able to say, hey, yeah, you have the framework, but boy, if you don't put your DNA into it, and if you can't put your own fingerprints on it, that's really where in our minds it gives some sticking points. I love the fact that you tailored it a little bit. And I don't know, Jeff shared one, but I would love to just know from your perspective and the mentees you worked with, what do you kind of see as the impact on some of the guys you've had a chance to mentor now?
So for a couple of them, it was really a finishing process. It was a finishing process. But for a couple of them, it was a massive, I'm going to call it a revelation, a revealing of who they really are and who they can be as Christian leaders. So for the ones who it was a finishing product for, these are guys that all their life they'd been to church. There's no question that Jesus is their savior, that, they know the Apostles' Creed. They can sing the doxology just without even having to do it with the church. They got the whole thing down, but they really never had a true sort of calling, or they didn't really think of themselves as leaders. So for the other guys, so it was fun to watch all of them. It was fun to watch because God's working in all of this and the way that He works. So with the other guys, the other two that just had the big reveals, that was fun. That was great because it's like, wait, you mean I can be a Christian leader? You mean what? I'm equipped for that? Well, partially, and God will continue equipping you as you move along, and you'll be more equipped next month than you are this month, and you'll be more equipped next year than next year. So that was a lot of fun just to watch these guys in their own personal sort of growth program that God preordained. He was right there with us the whole time, and he knew exactly where we were going to be at this moment and exactly what they needed and exactly, putting me in their life and allowing me the honor to help be a mentor to them. So it's fun, all of it. For those churches that are, if the audience for this, what we're doing right now is churches that are considering this program, there's no downside. It's all upside. You're growing, like Jeff said, you're growing your bullpen. You're growing a harvest of leaders that can create new leaders in the future. And it's going to be a continual gift and growing.
Yeah. And one of the things that you were talking about was men developing. And one of the things we see happen across the board, I'd love to get your feedback on this and what you would tell guys is, typically, and Reggie used to tell the story about this, that, hey, when they were talking about doing a mentoring program at North Point, that they said, hey, who are all the men that want to be mentored? And every hand went up. And then they said, hey, who are the guys that be willing to mentor? And then no hands went up. And so it's usually from a lot of guys are very hesitant to mentor. So as we're talking with men who may be kicking this around, what would you tell potential mentors who may be a little bit nervous or unsure about kind of stepping up to the plate to mentor?
The program is really set up to be 2 seasons of life ahead. The mentors are supposed to be 2 seasons of life ahead of the mentee. So for me, I'm a 52 and I have an 18 and a 20-year-old. So one season for me might be someone with middle school kids or elementary kids, and another season would be just married or brand new baby or something like that. So it's not perfectly defined, but that's a pretty good example. So because of that alone, you are going to be prepared to share your life experience. A super wise 30-year-old is just not going to know some of the things that even a not so wise 50-year-old is going to know. And that 50-year-old is going to have some experiences with, and I think that's starting with the worst case scenario. That's assuming that you've got some unwise 50-year-olds. What you're probably working with is a pretty good group of guys that have some wisdom and some, their heart's in the right place, good wisdom, that just aren't sure that they are being called. And you know what? Maybe they're not. Maybe they're being called to a different ministry. Just because they're hearing this and the words that I'm saying sound logical or reasonable doesn't mean that they need to be mentors. In fact, it's pretty rare that they would very specifically at this moment be called to that. But if they have that in their heart and they're questioning it and they're going, I wonder, but can I be the one? Can I be prepared? It is all laid out for you. You can't mess it up. Worst case, you're going to help these guys learn a little bit more than they did before. And that's the worst case. It's going to be a lot better than the worst case. And I would tell you, I've been leading or teaching or facilitating something for a long, long time. But going into this, I had those same fears. I had those same anxieties or those same questions about myself because, look, am I worthy? And of course, God just showed right up and led us right through. I'd give myself about an A something, maybe not an A plus, but the guys are way better off. And, don't hesitate just because you have a little self-doubt. You'll grow in the process too.
That's great feedback, Jimmy. Really appreciate that. And Jeff, from your perspective, I love kind of finishing up here. If this, as we have churches kind of weighing this and looking to see if this is an option, they're trying to see if it's a fit. Any suggestions from you, advice of how you would kind of recommend churches starting to weigh this and help make that decision?
Yeah, we took a couple of different approaches when we were trying to figure out what would be the best way to get this off the ground. And what it really boils down to is people. That's what ministry is always about. It's about your people. And so although we ask questions, who wants to be a mentor, who wants to be a mentee, you send out surveys. The bottom line is when whoever's in charge of the ministry picks up the phone or goes out for coffee or talks to a person that they think can be a mentor, that's when the rubber really hits the road. And when I'm looking at the folks that are part of men's ministry, I thought of guys like Jimmy here. And I know Jimmy's heart and I know his season of life. And I knew that God could use him for this ministry. And I mean, we'd had some conversations offhand. Jimmy had told me he was looking for an opportunity to invest in some folks in the younger generation. So I knew it would be a good fit. But your leaders, I mean, you know who your people are. And I would say start by finding your mentors. And that's, you just have to find one, or in our case, we found two to start out with, and then start looking for folks to participate. I would say that's going to be, for us, that was a little bit harder to find a wide variety of young men who could make that kind of commitment. Now we did it, everybody did it. And the reality is this thing spreads word of mouth.
Yeah.
You got to find somebody young who can find other people in their circle, and they know each other. They're talking, they're at their kids' baseball games. They're, sitting around at the park. They're doing their thing, living their life, and they have a community. You just have to find the right person in that community to tap.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys for spending a few minutes with us and giving up some of your time today. Very, very grateful for that, and learned a lot. And I know the guys who are watching are going to have a chance to learn as well. So thanks again for taking a few minutes.